Me, 35 male, and my wife, 32 female, have been married about 4 years. Anniversary is next month. We have lived in a large Pacific NW city for about 3 years, having moved from another part of the state. We've been together about 9 years in total. No kids, but those discussions have been ramping up this year. We've had our share of differences over the years, and there have been instances when I've been uncomfortable with some of my wife's male friends over the years, while she was in grad school and her career. I don't think I'm insecure, but the flirting and what now seems to be triangling or almost seeming to make me jealous with little hints, might now make some sense. It's led to fights and disagreements, and she has a history of mood swings and some depression, and she has ADHD. She currently works at a large sales/marketing firm and I'm in engineering. Up until a few weeks ago, I was under the impression that we had a solid marriage. Our sex life is normal, as far as I can tell, and although she makes more money than me, I never thought it was an issue. I have noticed the fights increased over the past 18 months, but over the past few months she's been very attentive, although seemingly more depressed, and she's lost a ton of weight. She is small, but went from that to skin and bones and not eating much. I think I now know why. 2 weeks ago I received an anonymous text message from someone that works with her. This person did not identify themselves, but given the information in the text, I'm pretty sure I know who it is. A good work friend of my wife who is married that we've socialized with as couples. The text came in 2 parts and the sender expressed a lot of sympathy for me. I deserve to know what's going on. In short, according to the sender, my wife has been or was having a long-term affair, over a year, with a good guy friend of hers at work that's 10 years older than her and married with a kid. Apparently they expressed that they loved each other, and it sounds like they spent a lot of time together, unbeknownst to me. As if that's not bad enough, my wife also started another affair with a second married guy, who works for the same company and is about 20 years older than her, who has several kids. That one was going on for a few months. Someone at my wife's office caught them in an empty office one afternoon having sex and reported it to my wife's HR. It turned into a mess and all 3 of them had to speak with HR. The 2 guys didn't know about each other and it supposedly got ugly between them too. My wife is likely getting fired along with the guy she got caught with. As you can imagine, I'm barely holding it together. We've had family at our house, so I've kept myself under control, and my wife does not yet know I received the text alerting me. She's also said nothing about any of this and has lied to me repeatedly over the past year about the guy who she had the longer affair with. I sensed something was up and mentioned it several times, and she just told me I was being weird. They were just friends, and on and on. So I dropped it. We have different cell plans, but I figured out her password, and seeing all the texting and photo texts between the people I have now identified as the work affair people was sickening. There are also a large amount of texts with another number, but I couldn't figure out who it was. I just know it's not any of her close girlfriends because I also have their numbers. I'm at a loss and feel like an idiot. It's the holidays and family is here, so I'm keeping a brave face, but once they leave after 9, I just don't know where to start. I can't even understand what's going on here with what is serially cheating, all the lying and the manipulation she's been doing. Is there any coming back from this? Or for those of you that have been down this road, what do I do next? I feel like I'm going to lose it at any second, and I appreciate any advice, regardless of how harsh it might be. Update 1. Thank you to everyone who has responded and reached out. It's been helpful and kind. I thought a lot about what everyone said and ended up trying to sync my work iPad with her phone, and it worked. Mostly. I got a chance when she went outside for a bit with our nieces and nephews and left her phone charging in our bedroom. I got lucky on the password, which was more obvious than I would have thought, and got it on the second try. Things are as bad as I imagined they were, based on what I could over, and the anonymous texter who tipped me off was clearly being truthful. I recovered archived WhatsApp chats and some ongoing ones. I'll summarize as best as I can because what I saw disgusted me and probably will traumatize me for a while. My wife was definitely sleeping with both coworkers and neither seemed aware, apparently. Long-term guy seems to have really liked her, but their recent convos got icy as my wife seems pissed that he disclosed the truth about their relationship as part of the HR process. Several weeks ago, so around when I found out and probably around the time the HR thing kicked off, she was telling him how much she loved him, but then a week later she's telling him she needs space, isn't sure, etc. Their archived messages, or the ones I could recover, go back well into 2022. They are sexual, graphic, include pics, details, etc. and always included I love yous on both sides. Short-term guy, the much older one, is worried about his job but also keeps trying to get her to meet to hook up. She's keeping her distance it seems, but some of their chats, they only went back to September, are definitely sexual, expressing sexual wants, etc. It seemed less frequent than long-term guy, not all that emotional, just flirty and highly sexual. She also bitched to him about long-term guy making her life complicated, a direct quote, even though it seems long-term guy wasn't the one who caught them. So I'm not sure how he found out. Here's what I ended up doing. I called my boss and explained what I could muster up, and I asked for a few weeks off. He was very understanding and gave me 3 weeks to sort things out and get away. My wife on Friday went out shopping and to a movie with her sister, and that's when I bailed. I packed up all the clothes I needed/wanted, essential electronics and a few random items and loaded up my truck with about 4 duffel bags and a few boxes. I spoke with her dad and spilled and told him what was going on. He was angry and incredulous at first, but when I shared some of the messages with him, the most PG I could find, he sort of broke down. Gave me a hug and I told him I'd be staying with friends out of town, who live about an hour away. Reading those messages, I felt like I was outside looking through a window of a love triangle movie, that turned into a horror movie because it's my wife leading this second life. I'm emotionally exhausted, I feel sick and I just cannot get my head around how someone could act this way. I know I need to file, so I'm hoping one of the lawyers I contacted over the past few weeks gets a hold of me this week. Any additional advice or thoughts are welcome. Update 2. It's been a busy last week, or at least I've been trying to stay focused by keeping myself busy by keeping my life organized as I move forward. Thank you again to everyone who continues to reach out with all the support and advice. Here's where things are at. So far I have not responded to any of her texts or calls. I don't plan to, but it's very difficult. There have been points every day where I break down, but I'm realizing, mostly through the advice I've gotten here, that nothing good is going to come from communicating with her. I want out, I'm filing for divorce, and the longer I go without having any contact is good for me, even if it feels raw right now. I have an attorney that family has helped me to pay for and I've gone through the whole story with her several times, provided all the information she's asked for, etc. I think my wife will be served at some point in the next week or two. At least that's my understanding. The validation I got from my attorney was a relief, but she was also blunt. She said, in no uncertain times, that my wife is a narcissist and that this is disordered, awful conduct that is really bad. She communicated that she doesn't see my circumstances too often, multiple affairs at once at the workplace and lies to all involved. For some reason that has made me feel better, like this really is as bad as it sounds and as bad as it's made me feel. Also, for those who have asked, we were renting our house and the lease period is up after March. I emailed the landlord, it's an older couple, let them know we were splitting up, one kept it brief, no details, and would not be renewing. My friends have graciously allowed me to continue staying with them and I'm just going to pay the rent for the next few months and bite the bullet. I can often work remote and even though my office is a bit of a drive from my friend's place, I can handle it for a bit. I guess I figure this is the best way to live somewhere where I feel secure, understood, and I don't have to deal with possibly seeing my wife. Finally, the last part. Maybe this was a bad idea, but I did it anyway. I made contact with the 2 APs. I got one of their numbers through a friend of a friend, and the other one I just called at my wife's company and got transferred through. That was the shorter term, older guy, I think he's 50 or early 50s. I introduced myself, told him we needed to talk and that I had some questions. He panicked on the phone, seemed nervous and said he didn't have anything to say and hung up. Longer term guy and I had 2 calls, for a total of about an hour. This is the guy who's 40 I think, who my wife was really good friends with. As much as I hate his guts, I respect that he answered my questions. I'll say this, he was confident but apologetic, and I believed what he told me based on some specific details we discussed over the course of the calls. He just laid it all out there. What was shocking was the crap my wife told him about me and us. I was verbally abusive, we rarely had sex, I was lazy and checked out, etc. etc. He acknowledged that he should have never started the relationship with her, and basically did so because he was miserable at home. He and his wife are now separated and he said he came clean with her about what had gone on with my wife, but admitted that if weren't for the HR situation he probably wouldn't have. He even gave me her number if I wanted to speak with her. He shared some painful things in response to my questions and was under the impression that the shit my wife was telling him about me was real, and that she really meant all the feelings she shared with him, because their relationship went on so long and he trusted her. I thanked him and after I hung up the phone, I just broke down again. Many of you have reached out and advised to not spend any time wondering why she did this, but I just can't get away from that topic ATM. I think I'm still in disbelief that someone I trusted and thought loved and valued me, could act this way. My mind has officially been blown to bits. Doing my best to just get through each day, keep no contact going and see this divorce process through, which is just at the beginning stages. Please keep the advice coming, it's been so helpful thus far. Update 3, this sub has been an immense resource and combined with the therapist I just started seeing, I hope it helps me get through this in one piece. Posting a weekly update has been cathartic and the feedback is so emotionally valuable. Thank you. Well, it's getting closer to 2 months since I got anonymous texts from what I assume is a coworker of my STBXW's, informing me of her serial cheating and HR issue. The head-snapping shock and numbness has not left me, but it's getting less dense. The realization that the embarrassment, pain and stupidity I feel is likely going to continue for a long while is tough to swallow, but I've committed to doing the best I can each day to not let it fully conquer me. If I'm being honest, I'm struggling emotionally. I'm keeping it together, but the tears flow each night, and I rarely cry. So I know this is my body speaking to me, so I just let it happen. I retained an attorney with the help of family and a few of them attended the first real meeting with me. The initial petition or filing is done and it's going to be served on her at some point in the next week or two. I feel good that I'm doing that now and I know it's what's best. My emotions have been up and down about it, but I cannot raise children nor do I want to have children or a life with someone that has the traits my STBXW has displayed. I'm committed to seeing it through. As for my STBXW, I've still not called, texted or emailed back. The longer I go, it gets a bit easier. Like I've regained some control of the insanity she dropped in my lap. I haven't gotten any calls or texts in 4 or 5 days, but I did get a long email last week. And I did read it. In sum, it was a lot of I love you and I realize I made a huge mistake type of language. She said she was sorry over and over, but what struck me was that it was kind of empty. She didn't address much in terms of details about why she was sorry and just acknowledged that I never should have been intimate with anyone else. I don't know what a remorseful letter or email should say. But I think in my case there's not much to explain. It's such insane, hurtful behavior that I don't even know if she can explain it. She ended it with a statement that she's hoping we can talk things out at some point. I also ended up calling the long-term AP's wife. I took him up on the offer, and actually, what he told me checked out. Surprisingly. It appears he was an open book with his wife once the secret spilled out. The lady was nice and to the point, said they had been struggling for years, they have now separated and will also be filing soon. It was weird because she didn't seem angry and it was like she was relieved. Said the guy was a great dad but they were terrible together, and that my STBXW had really done a number on him. One thing she did say that resonated and that we discussed is that she was very hurt that he didn't end things with her before it started. She thinks he was afraid to just get the divorce but the affair part caught her off guard and was embarrassing because she felt like a safety net. I can relate. It's like they are afraid to risk being alone or something. The nature of what my STBXW did is far too much for me. I've read a lot of stories on here and I've seen a few where people don't leave when they discover serial cheating and all the lies. I can't imagine staying. I'm so disgusted, but also heartbroken at the same time. Also, I don't know yet if she is losing her job. I was told by the AP wife, the one I spoke to, that she's on leave. Which doesn't sound good. I will post again when I can, just trying to focus on getting through this mess. Update 4. Thought I'd share the latest because this sub has been a major lifeline for me the past several months. And a big thank you to each and every one of you that has reached out individually. I truly appreciate it. Well, here we go. She's been served and the divorce is underway. It was a huge mixture of emotions and continues to be as I waver back and forth between relief, sadness, crying fits, anger and just about every emotion one could feel. I still feel like I'm in a horrible dream and I struggle to realize sometimes that this has actually happened. Never in a million years did I think this would happen. Her sister and her husband, I guess my ex Bill, have individually reached out and shared their disgust and support. Neither one of them knew apparently, and according to my ex Bill, who I was quite close with, they aren't hanging out with her. If nothing else, I appreciated their kind words, but I don't actually think they'll freeze her out forever. Nor do I really care about that part. But it did feel nice to not have them blame me or ignore me. They both genuinely seem to be at a complete loss over this. I still haven't spoken to my ex or communicated back in any way. There are still calls and texts, but they are less frequent. My understanding through the grapevine is that she was fired and is living with her parents. Or will be soon, since the house we rented had the rent covered by me through March. Not sure if she's fully moved out or what, but I gather that she's struggling and has lost even more weight. But apparently she's gotten the lips done even more than what she had before, for whatever reason. Full honesty, I did read a few of the emails she sent before I had to stop. It was a lot of the I love you stuff, tons of apologies, but no directly addressing her behavior or why really. She claims she's really messed up, and that she got carried away because it was easy for her to connect with these guys. She liked the attention and never meant for me to see her messages. I sat back when I read that part, and it struck me that she obviously would have kept doing this if whoever caught her at work hadn't walked into that office that day. She also claims she never really loved the long-term AP and that she only loves me, but that's obviously impossible to accept given the nature of the messages I saw and the consistent emotional expressions of that very thing for the better part of a year. I guess if she was lying to me, it makes sense she was lying to these guys too. I don't know. It's just such insane behavior. I suppose this is more of stream of consciousness than an actual update, but I just feel adrift. I don't want her back, but it's terrifying on some level to be in this position. Trying to understand how someone could look you in the eye and lie so consistently and pursue multiple other relationships at the same time is gutting. The long-term AP is tall and good looking, so that doesn't help, but the other guy is a legitimate creep. Bald, muscular, but a loud mouth and definitely a dude that is always looking to hook up. It's a weird dichotomy, especially since she was supposedly happily married to me. I don't know what to make of it. I think it was just getting the validation and attention from anyone, I guess. But the more I read and the more I really think back and connect the dots, the more it seems clear that she is in the personality disorder category. I realize that the best avenue is to just move on and forget her, but that's much easier said than done. It's so hard, and trying to understand the behavior has helped me heal. That's all for now, but as always, any thoughts or advice is welcome. Thank you. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Married my childhood friend only to discover she never wanted kids and was secretly supporting another man using my money. I 38 male, was married to my wife, 36 female, for 6 years. My wife and I were old friends before we started dating. She was a close friend of my immediate younger sister, so I knew her right from when she was a teenager. It wasn't until I graduated from college that something happened, and it brought the two of us closer, and from there, we fell in love. Since we already knew each other so well, our friendship bloomed, and we ended up dating and marrying after 1 year. Before my wife and I married, we agreed to only have kids once we were ready. She was the one who proposed it, and initially, I thought it would be only for the first 2 to 4 years of our marriage. I loved children, and I thought she said that because she wanted us to spend more time together or get better paying jobs that would put things in place before the kids arrived. Fast forward to 5 years after we married. I told my wife that I was ready for us to have children, but she kept coming up with multiple excuses that became annoying. Either she would say something about going for medical checkups to be sure her ovaries are in good shape, or we could just get a dog instead of having a child. Her excuses kept coming for almost a year, and because we were always fighting and arguing, we started to get distant from each other. It's not like I intentionally got distant. She was the one that started it. She refused to make my meals, do my laundry, or even sleep on our bed with me. And seeing all of this made me madder. I would not have been so worried about having children if it were left for me alone. I was only concerned that her biological clock was ticking, and she wasn't saying anything about having kids. Even before we married, I had always imagined having at least one child with her and how we'd be a big happy family, but my wife was trying to frustrate that reality. When our arguments and fights continued to the extent that I couldn't take it anymore, we were forced to sit and talk with a marriage counselor. Our marriage was slowly falling apart, and it was the exact opposite of what I had in mind for us. All those years of being married, I thought my wife and I were on the same page, but during one of our marriage counseling, I found out we weren't. In my presence, my wife told the counselor that she hated babies and couldn't even imagine having one. Also, she said she was very concerned about her body and wasn't ready to ruin her shape for a child or pause her life to care for a child. When I heard that, I felt so betrayed because she never mentioned it while we were dating, and she didn't say a thing about that. Even on the days we kept arguing about it. I didn't know what to do or say, so I left the session to clear my head. It was painful to discover that my wife played on my intelligence, despite knowing how much I loved children. I was so mad at her when we got home that we did not speak for almost 2 weeks, and she wasn't even bothered. Around that time, she would come home late at night and go to bed. The following day, she would leave so early for work. I tried as much as possible to not let everything weigh me down, but I couldn't. It really affected me. I imagined my whole life without a child because my wife cared so much about her body. The most painful part was, even when we had this agreement before we married, she never mentioned anything about not liking babies or not wanting to pause her life to raise kids. If she had told me, I wouldn't have married her because we had different opposing values. There's no way I would have accepted to marry a woman who hated babies and didn't want one when I loved babies and wanted at least 2 children. Throughout the time my wife and I were not talking to each other, she never showed concern for me, even for one day. Instead, she would come home looking cheerful and happy, then go to bed. I had to make my meals and care for the house some days. There were also nights my wife did not sleep at home. On those nights, she would text me late at night and say she was sleeping over at one of her girlfriend's places. I don't know which one hurt more between finding out that my wife would never be a mother or her sleeping out and spending time with her friends while neglecting me. Months after my last counseling session, our marriage got worse. Our arguments started again, but it got worse this time. My wife became something else, and any time we fought, she would say I could go ahead and divorce her if I didn't want us to be married anymore. Every time she said this, it broke my heart because I thought it'd be better to fix things instead of divorcing. I didn't understand why she kept saying that until I made a shocking discovery. One day, I received a call from my bank about strange charges on my account. When I checked it out, I saw that the charges were going into an apartment complex I had no idea about. I told the bank I had no idea about the apartment and tried to get them to charge back. After talking to the bank people, I decided to go and check out the apartment myself since it was in the same town I lived in. It didn't make sense for someone to charge my account because I was careful not to leave any of my bank or card details online. After driving for a while, I successfully located the apartment and decided to go to the apartment to see who was using my information to pay rent. When I knocked on the door, a young man in his early or mid-20s came out. When he opened the door, my eyes caught a glimpse of my wife's picture hanging directly on the other side of the wall. I was so confused, and the guy started talking before I could ask the questions in my head. He said he knew I was my wife's husband because she was his sugar mummy. Immediately I heard that, I had goosebumps on my skin, and my lower stomach churned. He said my wife rented the apartment for him, and I had to keep my mouth shut, or he would steal her completely from me. Talk about audacity. I couldn't even confront him like I had in mind, but I had a better idea. I was so mad at his audacity, so I began searching for his landlord and found him the next day. I reported everything to his landlord, and several days later, he was thrown out of the house. As for my wife, after I found out about her app, I didn't even say anything because there was nothing to talk about. I began to reconnect the dots and realized my wife had been cheating on me for a very long time, But I was too blinded to see that. My wife caused me the most pain, so I couldn't let her go scot-free. I filed a report to the police, and my wife was arrested for identity theft and eventually charged. We also divorced because I realized we were like water and oil, and she no longer had a place in my life. I now understand why she kept saying I could divorce her if I wanted. It was because she had someone else in her life and was using my money to pay his rent. This happened to me a very long time ago, and as I share this, I have a beautiful 3-year-old daughter, and I'm married to a beautiful younger woman. After things ended with my wife, I was down for a year plus, but I realized that I was living in the past instead of the present, so I decided to build the kind of life I wanted. I have never been so relieved and happier.